Hi guys, I hope you're doing really well. My name is Sarah, this is Rambo, and welcome back to What the Horror, the channel where we talk about horror movies old and new. Yes, back by popular demand is Rambo. You guys seem to really love him with his guest appearance in... I can't remember what episode it was, but he's back by popular demand. So he's going to help me do today's episode, which, as you probably will have seen from the title and the thumbnail, we are talking about my personal most rewatched horror movies. I did steal / magpie the idea from Sarah at Possessed by Horror. However, I did reach out to her and ask if she would mind if I did my own version of this episode. She said that was absolutely fine. So here we are, this is my version. I just thought it was such a fun idea, and I think that this is a really great way for you guys to learn a bit more about me as a horror fan, what I deem a comfort film, what I have rewatched the most, because a lot of these sort of define me as a horror fan, especially in my early days. So yeah, it's just a way for me to do mini reviews of each of these films, but for you guys to get to know me a little bit more as a horror fan. Over the last week or so, I have been collating a list. I've been going through my physical media. I have been looking on my Letterboxd account to pick out and make a list of my most revisited and rewatched horror movies. And while I was making the list, I actually noticed that there were a few different categories within this list of films, so I'm going to break them down into categories for this episode. So the first category will be rewatched horror movies from my teenage years, which I have a pile of the majority of the films from this list here, and I'm looking at the teenage years pile, and it is the biggest. And I will get into that into more detail when I cover that, but that is the most rewatched films from my teenage years, but some of these are still revisited, so I will pick those out when we get to that. There is also a little stack of films that is just one particular subgenre, so I thought that was quite funny. Then there is a little pile of films that have become frequent rewatches in the last few years. And then to finish off, there is my seasonal pile. And it is self-explanatory. They are rewatched films because I visit them every season. Okay, so let's get started with my most rewatched movies from my teenage years. And like I said, as we go through them, I will also let you know which ones are still most rewatched, and at the end of the episode I will pick out the ones that I would consider my actual most watched, perhaps the top three that are, yes, just the films that I have seen the most. Okay, so starting with the films from my teenage years, I will start off with a pretty obvious one, and that one is the original Scream. Is that in focus? So Scream is up there as one of my most watched horror films of all time, and it began back in my teenage years. It is one of the films that I consider a defining horror movie for me. I have watched horror or horror adjacent things, and certainly age appropriate horror things, for the majority of my life. So I've never been able to say, yep, that was the moment I became a horror fan, or that was the film that made me a horror fan. I don't have those stories because horror's always been there in the background. But there was a period of time in my life, in my teenage years, where what I was as a horror fan changed, and I became aware of slasher movies, and I just would consume as many of them as I possibly could do. My brother and I would go to HMV, it's a store here in the UK, I don't know if anybody has it, on Friday night, and we would buy just horror films and then watch them over the weekend. You know, we made our way through all of the Nightmare on Elm Streets, the Texas Chainsaws, the Screams, Jeepers Creepers, Final Destination, and the ones that really initiated that for me was Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer. You guys know that Scream is one of my favourite horror films of all time. I've mentioned it many a time on this channel. It was a most rewatched film in my teenage years, and it still is now in my adult years. That's why I actually have this on DVD, Blu-ray and 4K, because I've upgraded as the years have gone on. It's so smart and slick in its writing and its portrayal There's emotion, there's humour, there's genuine fear. I still find the first Scream film unnerving. I don't think it terrifies me, but it unnerves me. It gets under my skin and makes me feel uncomfortable after all these years and after all these rewatches. And following on from Scream is Scream 2. I apologise if you can hear the discs rattling around in the cases. Scream 2 was, like I said, part of the film collection that me and my brother would curate. And we did have Scream 3 as well, but back in the day I didn't love it as much as I do now. So it was usually Scream and Scream 2 that I would watch, especially considering one of my favourite characters within the franchise is Randy. And as we know, we get so much less of him as the movies go on. Scream 2, I think, is my second favourite Scream film. And it's because I think this encapsulates the 90s more than Scream does. Or it certainly encapsulates the 90s that I think of in terms of hairstyles, fashion, jewellery, makeup and nail polish, just the colours and the styles. I can remember dressing like that. I can remember those styles being around. So this is far more nostalgic for me than the first Scream. It's not as strong a film as the first Scream, but I still think there are some really good characters. There's some great cameos from Joshua Jackson and Sarah Michelle Gellar, who were just massive names at that time because of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Dawson's Creek. It could be one of my favourite portrayals of Sydney. I think that you've got this wonderful balance of vulnerable with really tough, which I think she's entertaining to watch, but it's admirable. Then again, still in the world of Scream is Scream 4. Now, yes, I am skipping over Scream 3 because I could probably have included all three of them, but I think of the franchise, it is 1, 2 and 4 that I've watched the most. And the reason why 4 is one of my most rewatched is because when this came out, we were living in a house that didn't have a TV aerial or a satellite dish or cable or anything. So to watch things, we basically streamed things off of what was available, like free streaming platforms and the physical media that I had. And when Scream 4 came out, I bought it on DVD because I hadn't seen it at the cinema. And I was just so excited to have a new installment in the Scream franchise, one that I hadn't seen to death like the previous three, that I then watched this one to death. This one became such a go-to source of entertainment for me when we were starved of entertainment in that brief period of time. And, you know, I know people hated on Scream 4, and over the years, it's actually gotten more love and recognition for being not that terrible, especially, I mean, hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? And I do apologise to the people who love 5 and 6. I don't love 5 and 6. They're not bad films, they're not great films, and I don't think Scream 5 is even a good film. So with hindsight, I think some people have realised that Scream 4 wasn't that bad. We got to revisit Woodsboro, and we got to see our characters in a different stage in their life. And, you know, the new generation were actually quite entertaining. We had Kirby, she was a great addition, and a pretty good Ghostface, at least in one of them in terms of Jill Roberts. So yeah, this is another rewatched one. I don't rewatch 2 and 4 as much as I used to, but Scream I do. Okay, still in the slasher world, but different franchise, and it is I Know What You Did Last Summer. This one, again, like Scream, just feels like it defines me as a horror fan in terms of I found it in my teen years and it just sent me on a different path, you know, rather than just picking up the bits of horror that were around on TV or that, you know, my mum would watch as well. I found myself a new subgenre that I hadn't experienced before, and they were teenagers in high school, so it really, I could relate to it. I mean, that's the point of these teen horrors, isn't it? They're aimed at teenagers because you can relate to them. Back in the 90s and early noughties, I was completely in love with Sarah Michelle Gellar, still am to a point. Buffy the Vampire Slayer was my favourite TV show, so the fact that she was in this as well, and Scream 2, obviously, it was going to be one of my favourites. I have actually done, or am doing, an episode with Sledgehammer Horror about my first horror movie, and I'm actually talking about this one. If it has already come out, I will leave a link to it. If it hasn't, then keep an eye out for that on my community page, but I go into more depth about this film. But I love it. I love the look of the killer. I love the setting of the fishing town. I think the 4 leads are fantastic. Their chemistry is great. But what's interesting is these leads are different to the ones from films like Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street. They're not just friends who are camping in the same place. They're not just friends who go to the same high school. These 4 leads are tied together through an event that traumatized them, changed the trajectory of their lives forever, and tied them to each other forever. So none of them can walk away from this situation. None of them can believe that it's real or not real. They all know it's real. They're all in it, and they have to act on it. They're not observers of the situation. They're not seeing a body count rise up and just not doing anything about it. These leads are active. They're involved. They go and investigate because they want to find a way out of the situation. And I think that makes this slasher stand apart in this subgenre. Could also possibly be the strongest Scream knockoff in terms of what came out in the wake of Scream. I would probably say this and Urban Legend are the strongest ones. I would rewatch this a lot. So much. I loved the soundtrack, I loved the fashion, the characters and the setting. It's a comfort watch that I still revisit. I try to make it a seasonal yearly watch because it's on the 4th of July, even though we don't have that in the UK. It just is a reason to, put it on as a summer watch. I don't rewatch it as much as I would like to. But it still maintains or remains one of my most rewatched horror films. Because like Scream, it's also a comfort. It reminds me of a time, I said on my most recent rewatch of it on Letterboxd, that it reminds me of a more innocent time when I was just a teenager watching a horror film. Before I got to be what I'm like now, where I can't watch a film without pulling it apart and analysing it and thinking, is there an episode from this? It just reminds me of just innocent, easy fun. So another reason why a lot of these films are my most rewatched horror films in my teen years is because back in the day, we didn't have streaming, and I certainly didn't have Sky or digital or cable. I had 5 channels and that was it. So if I didn't want to watch what was on the TV on the 5 channels, I had to watch my physical media collection because that was your only choice. That was it. You watched what you had, and you don't have infinite money. So, you don't, because you're younger, you're a child as well. So you don't have this massive collection. And so wanting to consume films, wanting to consume horror, I would just rotate through the ones that I have. And that is why this next one is one of my most rewatched. It's not one of my favourite horror films. It's not particularly a great horror film, but it is one that I have a lot of nostalgia for because it was such a familiar watch to me in my teen years. And that is Valentine, another slasher. It's not a great film, but look, you can tell it's an old one because it's a cardboard one. Aren't these great? With the chapter list. Oh, it's just so fun. But it's a bit battered because it's only made of cardboard. But yes, so I do sometimes like to revisit this around Valentine's Day as well. So I do still dip into it. It's certainly not rewatched as much as it was when I was younger. But yeah, I have a lot of nostalgia and like sentiment towards it, if that makes sense. Okay, the next one is another slasher, and this is another one that was in my and my brother's collection. We had it on DVD back in the day. A couple of years ago, I got an upgrade of a Blu-ray, but that is the 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake. Now, this one was the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre film I ever saw. I saw this before the original. Not much of a gap between them. I did see the original as well. We did have that. I loved this, absolutely loved it, because back in the day I was more squeamish than I am now. My tolerance to gore was very, very low. And having watched quite easygoing slashers like Valentine and I Know What You Did Last Summer, this one was so shocking. It was so dark and gritty and dirty and violent, and yeah, I loved it. I don't know why. I don't know, maybe it was because it felt so extreme to me at the time back in the day. Perhaps it felt so risque, and you know, I thought I was a badass because I'd managed to watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake. Absolutely loved this one, would rewatch this one a lot. I don't tend to rewatch this one anymore. My favourite of the franchise is the original, and if I was gonna watch a TCM movie, it would probably be that. But like I said, it was one of the first more extreme horrors for me, which is funny, you know, because obviously on the grand scale of things, it's not that extreme, but this was one of the first ones that introduced me to that level of violence and gore. So it is a defining film for me. If you were talking firsts, this one would be up there. It's not one that I love anymore. It's not one that I rewatch as much anymore, but I like to have it in my collection and check it out now and again. So the next film I don't have as a singular film, it is part of a collection, but that is Aliens from 1986. Also, how beautiful. Oh, look at those colours. Oof. This is my Blu-ray collection of the first 6 films. It goes up to Alien Covenant, which I've still not watched. I've only seen up to Prometheus, but the Alien franchise was my mum's favourite film franchise. So we had this film collection on VHS, I think. Yeah, we had it on VHS. Man, I'm showing my age now. And she couldn't wait to show. This is what I mean about horror being around me for quite a long time. She was into horror stuff, but would wait until I was age appropriate to watch them. But she couldn't wait to show me the Alien films. And I remember the day she finally said, right, that's it, you're ready. We're going to watch all 4 of them, because at that point we only had Alien Resurrection. Yeah, and I loved all of them, but I really, really connected with Aliens, and it was because of the Marines. I love Sigourney Weaver's Ripley. She's one of the most amazing characters, and her portrayal is so good, but it is the Marines that makes me love Aliens. They are so hilarious, and I would quote them so often. I think me and my brother used to quote them to each other. His favourite was, is he called Drake, the blonde guy, and we would quote stuff that they say, and obviously Bill Paxton as Hudson, absolutely hilarious. R.I.P. Bill Paxton, amazing. But yeah, just so many amazing lines. Hicks's character's brilliant, Hudson's brilliant, Vasquez is just a badass. So I just loved it so much. And again, it felt a bit more risque because it was an 18, because it was a little bit more violent in a different sense, I think, to Texas Chainsaw. But I just loved it, and I would rewatch it a lot. I would come home from school and I would put this on. Even if I couldn't get all the way through it, it was fine, because at least I had the beginning bit where you meet the Marines, and that's where you get a lot of their best one-liners. I don't rewatch this as much as I would like to. It is still a film that I love very much. It's definitely up there in my favourite horror films. But in terms of a rewatch, no, I don't get to see it as much as I would like to. I do intend to go through the entire franchise again to watch Covenant, and I believe there is a new Alien film coming out this year as well, so maybe that's something I will do for this channel. Maybe I do a ranking of this franchise if you guys are interested. But I think since I've had my Letterboxd account, I've watched Aliens once or twice, maybe just once to be honest, but great film. And again, a lot of these rewatches define me for a different reason. They maybe start the path of me becoming a particular horror fan. One of them is one of the most violent, and then one is also just something that is a shared love that I have with my mum, which is a nice thing, because I think a lot of horror fans, a lot of their origin stories seem to come from, oh, my parents would watch these, or they would show me them. I know I'm doing the same thing now with my own mini-me. I've been educated them on horror films for the last however many years. So it's like it's passing down the generations, and that's really nice to have. Okay, the next film again is in a Blu-ray collection that I have, but the one that is the most rewatched is the 1999 The Mummy, starring Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz. This film is so beloved to me and one of my most rewatched films. I love this so much. I can remember the first time I watched it when I was younger. Every year for one weekend out of the year we would go and stay with some family friends, and the family introduced us to The Mummy, and you can tell how young I was that I was terrified when I first watched this. When the it's not the locust storm, is it? It's a sandstorm it's one of the plagues arrives and they all have to run and hide in the tomb, and Mr. Burns is attacked by the mummy. That scene absolutely terrified me. So this film was just absolutely perfect for me. It's set in ancient Egypt. It's set in the 1920s, I think, isn't it? And I love a period horror film. Also, Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz as Evelyn and Rick. How can you not love them as a couple? They're so adorable. And just Evelyn. Rachel Weisz is Evelyn. I'm so in love with her. Evelyn is my biggest girl crush. I just think she's so wonderful. She's intelligent and beautiful and brave and just kicks ass, but is, you know, a little bit goofy as well. And I really like that. In fact, they did a range of Funko Pop vinyl figures of the mummy, and my husband saw me eyeing up the Evelyn one day, and I thought, oh, I don't really need it, you know, but I would quite like it. And then one Christmas, or for one birthday, he ended up getting me the entire collection. So there's Evelyn and Rick and the mummy as well. What's his name? Imhotep. So there's the full collection of all three, and I just love them, and they are pride of place on my shelves that I have for all of my physical media. They sit atop of it. Pride of place. And I rewatch this still to this very day. If I want a comfort watch, if I'm not feeling very well, if I'm feeling tired, or just feeling absolutely on top of the world, I will bung this in as a rewatch because it's such a comfort watch. To me, it obviously doesn't scare me anymore, but it makes me laugh and it warms my heart. And I think that it's a film that hasn't aged or dated. I think that the special effects in it still stand up today. I think the characters are still just as lovable. The villains within it are not even that bad. I mean, they're villains that you enjoy, like Benny. He's a good villain. But, you know, the other ones, there's still enough likability to them that there's no part of this film that you think, oh, that's a bit iffy, that's not aged well, or oh, I hate that character. I think it's this... just dropped it. I love it so much I just thrown it away. No, it's just this perfect little bubble of such a wonderful film. And you guys know that I'm working on my evolution of Dracula, and some of you guys said that you would like me to do episodes on all of the other Universal monsters. So I will be doing one on the mummy. So I will be doing more of a deep dive into this trilogy and this portrayal of the mummy. So I cannot wait to do that. Any excuse to revisit this film and dig a little deeper into it, and I'm there. And the next one is Psycho. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho from 1960. This film, again, like the mummy, I can't put into words how much I love this film. First discovered it as a teenager, and so began my lifelong love affair with Alfred Hitchcock's movies. I love them so much and I consume them wherever I can. I've seen quite a few. I do have on my Letterboxd account a ranking of the Alfred Hitchcock films that I have seen. I've still got some to see, but I'm running out of them. Apart from like the silent movies from the 1920s that he did that are really hard to find, or maybe might not be quite what I'm looking for. But Psycho is the one that started that love affair. This one and Rear Window I watched very close together, and Rear Window is one of my favourite films of all time, especially one of my favourite non-horror films. But there's something about Psycho, the fact that it's in black and white, the performances, just such an iconic film, so defining of the horror genre, especially the slasher subgenre. I know not everyone agrees that this is the start, and it probably isn't, but it is certainly a contributor to what we know as the slasher film. There's no denying that. And I love the risks that he took with killing off the main character. That must have been so shocking. And you know that question of, if you could watch a film again for the first time or without knowing anything about it, what would it be? For me, it would be Psycho. I wish I could have watched this not knowing about the shower scene, because I would love to have experienced that surprise, because it really just comes out of nowhere. It's not like with Drew Barrymore on Scream. It's not the cold open. You know, you're a good chunk of the movie in. You're about a third of the way in. And Norman Bates is one of my favourite villains of all time. I know in my tier list ranking, I think I said Ghostface is my favourite, and perhaps Ghostface still is, but Norman Bates is either a fraction behind or on par with. He's one of the most interesting, complex villains and characters in horror that we've ever had, played to perfection by Anthony Perkins, with so much heart and emotion and sympathy, and just so wonderfully done that there's this character that you feel is, sure, a villain, but he's not a bad guy. They're actually a victim themselves, you know, from society, from his relationship with his mother, from his upbringing, mental health difficulties. And I think that this is a villain that, despite being from the 60s and earlier, because remember it's based off of the book by Robert Bloch, who wrote it. I don't think he wrote it in the 1960s. I think it might have been in the 50s. I do have it on my bookshelf, but I can't remember what year it was. This is a character that still fits today. His difficulties with his sexuality and his own body, his stunted growth mentally, all these different things. He's still one of, he's a villain for the ages, if you know what I mean. He's another one that's aged well, is what I'm trying to say, and can still be not relatable, but just understood, I think. I don't know if I'm wording that very well, but he doesn't encapsulate the time that he's from. He's not a gimmick. The setting as well, I love the Bates Motel and the Bates house. It's one of my favourite horror houses of all time. Again, up there with Stu Macher's, but yeah, I think the Bates house and the motel might be my favourite. I lost my damn mind once when I was watching an episode of Murder, She Wrote, and you guys won't know this, but I'm obsessed with Angela Lansbury and Murder, She Wrote, J.B. Fletcher. I think, she's just wonderful. Anyway, there was an episode where she goes to Hollywood and she goes to the set of the Bates Motel in the house, and it was like two worlds colliding, and I lost my damn mind. So this is still the original DVD that I bought years ago, back in my teen years. I do want to upgrade. I would like the 4K version of Psycho, because there's apparently two versions. One that was not released, or it was the theatrical one but wasn't released on physical media. And the thought of there being scenes from this film that I haven't seen yet is so exciting. And there's all these behind the scenes documentaries and interviews and studies of it. So yeah, that will be a happy day when I can upgrade to the 4K of Psycho. I just love it. And the final one for my teen years, or one that, I should have said actually that Psycho is one that I definitely revisit to this day. But the last one from the pile of films that I watched in my teen years is Saw. Yes, obviously I watched this back in 2004. And I watched this in a year. It was an interesting year to watch this film. I know it gets considered to be a splatter film, and it birthed the torture porn, but actually it was meant to be more of a thriller, more of a suspense, looking at human nature and immortality and health and death and value in life and all that kind of things. And so I watched this at a very formative age and a very interesting year, and this film just spoke to me. It just connected with me so much, and it terrified me and disgusted me and made me feel, uneasy, but I just loved it so much, and never stopped rewatching it. There'll be years that have gone by where I've not seen it for a long time, but I still rewatch this to this day. I have this on DVD, Blu-ray, and now 4K. I invested in this. I was given some money for my birthday last year, and I treated myself to this, and it's one of the best things I've ever bought in terms of my physical media, because of the special features and all of the extra information that I gained on it, the audio commentaries on it. As you know, I got my money's worth from it last year, doing my deep dives and rankings and all sorts of stuff with this franchise, but so worth the investment for all the additional entertainment and information that I got on a film that I love so much. I won't talk much more about Saw because you guys know that I love it, but it was again another defining horror film for me. I still watch it to this day and is very much rewatched. I sometimes put it on as a comfort film, and I know there's that joke of, her comfort film, it's Saw, what a joke. But it's a comfort film because I know how it goes, I know the setting, but it's very sort of still and quiet and dialogue based in a lot of scenes, very like Alfred Hitchcock, like Rope or Dial M for Murder, when you don't have the erratic editing and the traps. And I think that's something nice to have on in the background. It can be quite soothing, or, you know, if you're not fully paying attention, if you're ironing or cleaning or on your phone, it's just, you know, it's an easy one to have in the background. Okay, so the next three, there is a pattern with them for sure, and it's a subgenre that I do really love, and apparently I like to, you know, revisit and rewatch a lot, and that is shark movies. Basically, I've told you before, I'm a sucker for a shark movie. The first one is, as you pull this off from the pile, Jaws. Steven Spielberg's Jaws. This is one of my favourite horror films and favourite films of all time. I absolutely love Jaws. I have a poster of this in my dining room as well, a piece of artwork that is just beautiful. I also got the Jaws metal poster for this room to go behind you guys for Christmas. So yeah, love this film. It is one of the greatest films ever made. Is it perfection? Probably. It's like up there with Back to the Future of what you could consider a perfect movie. I don't remember the first time I watched it, but I remember, you know, becoming aware of it and having watched it, and we studied it a little bit in film class, and it was one of those first films where I realised, oh, there are creative choices in films. Everything is done for a reason and a purpose. It's not just what you're seeing and hearing. There are other hidden things. And the scene we were shown was when the orca sails off out of harbour, and you see it through the dried shark jaw that's in Quint's shop, and they're literally sailing off into the mouth of a shark into danger. And my mind was blown of all the little details that were put in. And it was Jaws that was one of the first films that made me aware of that and made me want to know more about not just the films I'm watching, but the filmmaking industry, the filmmaking process, the thoughts behind it, the psychology behind it, the skills behind it. So this is definitely another defining film, because that is what I do on this channel. I pull films apart. I want to know more, and I share that with you guys. Jaws is one of the films that initiated that way of looking at movies. And still to this day, I rewatch this so often. I try to watch it every summer, and I will see things that I haven't seen before or think of it in a different way. I'm just realising I haven't actually watched all the special features on this Blu-ray, so I think we need to rectify that. The second one is Deep Blue Sea. This one is a sleeve DVD, so I'll show you the sleeve, and then I'll show you this is the original cover. So again, this is going to show my age, but back in the day I had a combi TV in my room. So it was a little tiny box TV, and underneath it had a VHS player, and I had Deep Blue Sea on VHS, and it would live in the TV, and I would basically just watch it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 50 minutes. I would just, whatever I could watch of it, I would put it on, and I would have it on repeat, and as soon as it had finished, I'd rewind it to the beginning and I would start again. But I love Deep Blue Sea. I think I was addicted to the adrenaline that it made me feel. This is a film that never really lets up. It's not subtle. It's quite violent for a shark film, and the score build, it's all geared to get your adrenaline pumping, and I think that I was addicted to the film doing that for me. Plus, it's just such a daft good time. Some great performances, some less than stellar performances. I do still rewatch this, not as much as I did. It's certainly not permanently in my media player on repeat, but I do still rewatch this. I do still enjoy it. And I also think that as the years have gone by, I have seen more and more accolades and praise for this film, saying after Jaws, this is probably the best shark movie that we've had. And I just think, yeah, you Johnny-come-latelys, I always knew that it was awesome. And the last one in the shark subgenre is The Meg. Yes, this is trashy, summer blockbuster popcorn daftness, but again, I love this film. Never saw it at the cinema, bought it on DVD to check it out. Love it. Just love it. This was my first No, actually it wasn't my first Jason Statham film, because I'd seen, is it Snatch he's in? Oh, which London gangster movies here, and it's not Lock, Stock, is it? Anyway, either way, I'd seen him in one of those, but apart from that, this was his first action film I'd seen him in. Love Rainn Wilson. Brilliant to see him as the what's it, like a billionaire or millionaire in this. Ruby Rose is great in this. Lee Bingbing, really, really good. Only film I've seen her in. So yeah, it's a fun time. It's glossy, it's brightly coloured, it's fun, it's a good summer watch. I love films with a water setting. I love a good bad shark film, and I think that this is more family friendly. You know, this is the least violent of the three that I've shown. It's more of like a comfort rewatch. It hasn't defined me or changed my trajectory as a horror fan in any way. This is just one that I find fun and I like to check out now and again for a water summer film. I didn't love The Meg 2 as much. It was fine. It was a good enough time, but I didn't love it as much as The Meg. Okay, so the next three are more recent rewatches that I have either discovered in recent years or have begun to rewatch in recent years. And the first one is Ringu. Now, can you see that? So, Ringu was not originally a most rewatched horror movie, because you guys know this is the film that gave me the biggest and the best and the most dramatic scare of my life out of any horror movie. And I watched this in the cinema, traumatized, never watched it for a long, long time. And then I did revisit it, and I would revisit it again and again. And I just realised that while this film had terrified me, I actually loved it. I loved it for giving me that experience, and I loved it for the quality of film, how good a film this actually is, how much I love the story, how much I love the protagonists and the antagonists. And in recent years, this has been one that I do revisit. I revisit it because I want to watch it more and see bits that I've missed, pick up on bits that I didn't notice before, have a deeper think about it. I did do an episode comparing Sadako and Samara, and I am again this year going to do one comparing Ringu with The Ring. So this will be getting a rewatch soon, but actually I've just realised that I think I watched it in October for my 31 of 31. I think it was my second watch after Halloween 6. So I've actually only just watched this, but I will be watching it again, including the special features, ready for the deep dive. So wasn't always, but has become a recent most rewatched film. That's a difference. The second one is Insidious II. This is from the Insidious franchise, which I only discovered for the first time in 2020. And since then, I have rewatched this. I couldn't even tell you. When I went on my Letterboxd account, I think it was it 5 or 6 times? And that's not even from 2020. It's not my favourite out of the franchise. My favourite is Insidious 3. And I do rewatch Insidious 3 and 4 quite a lot because I actually like those ones. I don't tend to rewatch the first one as much for enjoyment. If it's for a deep dive or a ranking, like I did last year, then I will rewatch it. I don't love James Wan's direction of the Insidious films. I think that the string soundtrack and the loud noises and the clatterings are really irritating. I once watched the first Insidious while I had a headache, and I think I've just fallen out with the film, basically. Love the Lambert family, love Specs and Tucker and Elise, all that stuff. But in terms of enjoyment as a rewatch, the first one is not for me. And the third and the fourth, I love them, but I'm going to sit and watch them as a film. Whereas with Insidious 2, this is a comfort watch. If I want to bung one on and only have half of my attention on it, this is the one for me. Because less action actually happens that you have to focus on. And I love, love, love when you have Specs and Tucker with Carl, Elise's friend, and what's she called? It's Josh's mum. I've forgotten her name. Lorraine. They go off as like a little mock knockoff Scooby gang doing their investigating in the hospital, in Parker Crane's house, and I love that bit. It gets a bit boring towards the end, and the very beginning bit, I don't love it as much when it's focusing on the Lambert family in this film, but I do love the Scooby-Doo investigating. So this is one that I would reach for to put on if I only need to put half my attention into it. So like I said, not favourite of the franchise, but favourite one to rewatch as a comfort watch, and because you don't have to pay as much attention. If I could only rewatch one Insidious film, I think I would probably pick the third one. Yeah, I think so. That is my favourite. And the final most recent rewatch one might be a surprise for you guys, because I think I only mentioned this one maybe twice on this channel when I was ranking the films of 2021 and when it came out and I did a review of it, but this was like way back in the day. like very early what the horror. So this one might be a surprise for you guys, but that is Last Night in Soho. And this one was actually also on Sarah's list from Possessed by Horror, because I think this film came out and a bunch of us we just fell in love, head over heels in love with it. I mean, I fell in love with it because of Sandy, Anya Taylor-Joy's character, because hello, it's Anya Taylor-Joy. But her character is spectacular. Matt Smith is an amazing actor. I discovered him first when he played the Doctor back in 2010. His character, the first time you meet him, you know, you get swept up in all the glamour of Sandy and I've forgotten his name. Jack. It's Jack. That's it. Sandy and Jack. You get swept up in the magic of them, and his portrayal of that is so good. I would say that Thomasin McKenzie also does a really good job, but it was the glamour and the romance of Sandy. I was like Thomasin McKenzie's character. You know, I was bewitched by the magic and the nostalgia and the romance of the 60s and Sandy's story, and you end up going on this same journey as this character as you realise you're looking at it through rose-tinted glasses. And there's that difference between, you know, looking at it with rose-tinted glasses and the reality of something, and how dangerous nostalgia can actually be, to misremember things and misadmire and idolise things. It was just such a beautiful film. I love Edgar Wright. He's one of my favourite film creators. I said in my Q&A, I was asked if I could meet a director, who would it be? And I said Leigh Whannell and Edgar Wright, because I've loved all of Edgar Wright's stuff, apart from, is it Scott Pilgrim? I've not seen that. But I love Spaced, the TV show he did with Simon Pegg. Hot Fuzz is one of my favourite films of all time. Love Shaun of the Dead. Love The World's End. And love this one. I knew I was going to watch it because it was Edgar Wright, and it was so different to anything else he's ever made, and I just fell in love with it. And to say it only came out, well, I mean, it's like 4 years ago now, isn't it? No, wait, hang on. Come on, Sarah, do your maths. It came out in 2021, so I've had like 2 or 3 years of it or whatever. So yeah, this is one of my most recent rewatches. Okay, so now, final selection, we have my seasonal rewatches. So these are films that are the most rewatched because I revisit them every single year in the time that they are set or that they remind me of. And the first one is the original My Bloody Valentine. This is the version I have of it. It's not a great one. It's like a 80s collection, but this is the only one I could get in the UK. But at least it means I have this on physical media. Much prefer this to the remake. One of my favourite horror films. I do love it. I think it's underrated. I know it's a cult classic, but I don't think it gets enough recognition. Although, having said that, I will also say I understand why people don't like it. Because is it the MPA or whoever hacked this movie to bits? So the kills have been drastically changed, and, you know, I'm missing something. I have seen the edition where all the stuff's been put back in, and I think that if you don't see that, it is a different experience. And I can see why some people maybe think it's a little boring. I get it. Like, I'm not going to shame someone for not liking it, but I do think it could get more recognition. I love the 3 leads. I think that their love triangle is hilarious. I don't think Sarah should go with either of them, Axel or TJ, because they're both friggin' irritating men who just need to get a grip. I mean, they're literally pulling and flinging her around and her hair's flying everywhere. It's like, back off, dude. Chill out. So it's funny. And I love, what's it called? Is it Harry Warden, the miner? I love the look of the miner. And unfortunately in the UK, we don't really get anything My Bloody Valentine. We didn't get that figure. We don't get t-shirts. It's so annoying because I love that aesthetic. I love the setting of the mining town, and then the contrast of the dirt and the darkness of the mines and the coals with the crepe, colourful, frilly decorations for Valentine's. I love that juxtaposition, just like I love the fishing setting of I Know What You Did Last Summer. I love the mining setting of, is it called Valentine Bluff, I think. And then we also have the remake of My Bloody Valentine 3D from 2009, I believe. This one I don't love. In fact, I probably dislike this one more with every rewatch because this is such a problematic film. Not the portrayal by, what's his name? The guy from Oh, he's not called TJ in this, is he? He's called Tom in this one. I like his performance, and I think that Sarah in this, is it Jamie King who does this one? Jamie King, yeah. I think she's really good. It's just problematic. Take, for example, there is a scene in the film where Betsy Rue is butt-ass naked running around from the killer, and she's in a sex scene with this guy who is played by the writer. The writer of the film wrote this scene and then placed himself in it in a sex scene with Betsy LaRue, and then had her running around naked for a good 12 minutes of the runtime. It's just, I don't know. Call me whatever you want. I just think it's problematic. Still fun enough though to rewatch it every year and have it in my collection. The next one is Happy Death Day to You. I love this film and I rewatch it every year in the month of my birthday. So this is just a fun one. I'm not really big on horror comedies, but I quite like how sweet this one is. I think it has a sweet message, and Tree, the lead, is so... she's great. Sorry, the arm of my chair keeps creaking and squeaking. Yeah, it's a character. She's like an anti-hero. She's a complex one. She starts out not as likeable. You get to like her a lot more. The face of the killer, the babyface killer, is fine enough. It's a cool concept, like the Groundhog Day. You know, repeating the same day over and over, so you get to be creative with the different kills. So yeah, it's sweet, it's a good time, and I watch it every year to mark my birthday. Then we have an obvious one, which is the original Halloween. This one is one that, again, I watch every October because of Halloween. It's also one that me and my brother had in our collection and is one of his favourite horror films of all time, perhaps his favourite. So we would rewatch this a lot in my teen years as well. I don't love the horror franchise as much as everybody else. It has grown on me over the past few years when I did a ranking of all of them, but I do still revisit this. It's a classic. It's important, like Psycho, to the genre, and, you know, Jamie Lee Curtis, come on. Okay, last two. And the next one is Sleepy Hollow from 1999, starring the wonderful goddess Christina Ricci and Johnny Depp. This is one I saw at the cinema back in 1999, I think, is when I said it came out. Scared the living bejeebus out of me. When I was younger, I used to live opposite a farm, and in this film, if you've seen it, you'll know that the Headless Horseman emerges from mist and fog, galloping on his horse over fields. And after seeing this, I had to go outside. We used to keep rabbits and guinea pigs, and we had multiple of them to keep them warm. We had them in this, like, it was like a shed, basically. So I would go out on a night and make sure they were secure. And it was the night I'd watched this at the cinema, and it was really misty and foggy, and there was a horse galloping over the field towards me. I was like, nope, nope. I don't even know if I actually successfully locked them up that night, because I just hightailed it straight back to the house. It scared the bejeebus out of me. This was back when, you know, it was like young horror fan Sarah. I have since come to love it. This is one of my favourite films for aesthetic. I love the monochromatic look of it. I love the old style setting of the 1800s. It is the 1800s, yeah, because at the end of it, they're just going into the 1900s. I love Johnny Depp's Ichabod Crane, perhaps one of my favourite performances of him. And Christina Ricci is just a goddamn goddess, and I really like her in this film as well. Plus, Christopher Walken as the Headless Horseman. So, you know, what more could you ask for? Love the aesthetic, love to watch this in Halloween, still a yearly rewatch. And the final seasonal one is the original Black Christmas. I do quite love this cover. This is a 101 Films edition, and I do really quite like this. This is the only one I could get hold of in the UK. We don't get like the Shout and Scream Factory editions over here, the special editions. It's so irritating. But yes, this is one of my favourite horror films. It's such a classic. It's another important one in terms of the slasher genre. It is an interesting villain. It's a very voyeuristic film, puts the audience in the eyes and the sort of the position of the killer. So it's a little bit twisted in that sense. It has one of my favourite final girls of all time in... I love her so much, I've completely forgotten her name. She's played by Olivia Hussey. What's her name? Bradford. Jess Bradford. Oh my God. Jess Bradford is one of my favourite final girls. I think that she's fascinating. She does not match the blueprint of what we came to know of the final girl. You know, she's sexually active. When she thought that she was pregnant, she's talking to her boyfriend that she's not just going to marry him and settle down and be a housewife. She had plans for her life. She wanted to get an education. She wanted to get a job. So she's quite independent. She's a free thinker. She's, you know, like I say, she's not virginal, but she's a good person. And I just think she's quite an interesting, complex final girl. Love this at Christmas. Great, obviously, Christmas aesthetic. It's got John Saxon in it. Always great. And the house mother, I can't remember her name, but she's really funny. So this again is another yearly rewatch for seasonal reasons. Okay, so to finish off, I just want to show you the films that I would consider are my most rewatched horror films of all time. In terms of, in the past, looking at these, all of these are from my teen pile. So they were my most rewatched and remain my most rewatched. All of these films I have watched in the last 12 months, some of them more than once, and are also the films that I would say have gone towards defining me as a horror fan, not necessarily my modern taste, but just setting me off on the path that led me to What the Horror. So most rewatched, probably some of the most important, and also a lot of these are my favourites as well, so I think that says something, that some of these rewatches are not my favourite films. They're a comfort watch. They're one that's easy to half watch. They're ones that I watched because they're all I had in physical media. They're what I watched for seasonal reasons. But these are my most rewatched and some of my most favourite. So if I can hold this pile up for you, here we go. But these are my most rewatched horror films of all time. We have Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Jaws, The Mummy, Saw, and Psycho. Well guys, that is it. That is the end of my most rewatched horror movies. I had no idea when I set out with this that this would be such a long episode. I'm hoping when I edit it that I can actually whittle it down for you, because I've actually been filming for over an hour and I'm on my third battery in my camera. So that is absolutely ridiculous. So I'm hoping that I can skim that time down for you guys to make it a more digestible length of an episode. But I hope that you've enjoyed this. Like I said, this is such a fun idea that I enjoyed watching Sarah's Possessed by Horror. I enjoyed making the list for this, and I've enjoyed sitting here talking about these films. Just no script, no deep dive, just randomly talking and rambling about these films that I have enjoyed over the years. And I hope that it has helped you get to know me a little bit more as a horror fan. Let me know down in the comments some of your most rewatched horror movies, but not just a list of the films, but also perhaps the reasons why. Are they ones that you had in physical media? Are they comforting? Do they scare you and you like to revisit that scare? So let me know your favourites, but also the reasons as well, because I'm really interested to know what they will be. Also, if you're new here, if you found me through this episode, then please do subscribe and join the What the Horror family and give this video a like if you enjoyed it. You can also check out other episodes that I have done. I generally do movie reviews, movie deep dives, and analysis of characters, villains, and films and franchises. But in the meantime, thank you as always for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. Take care of yourselves, and I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye.